Hey everybody, this is your spoiler warning for X-Men 97. It will be spoiled for you if you have not seen it yet. It is 10 episodes. If you have not seen all 10 episodes will be discussed in great detail.
And these are their stories. Dun, dun.
Enjoy the podcast.
TNMP, the Nerdy Misfit Podcast, with your hosts, Connor O'Neill and Matthew Hughes.
Hello.
Hello.
Welcome, each and every one of ya, to the Nerdy Misfit Podcast.
Are you doing the whole podcast like that?
That's good. Hello. Welcome.
Hello, welcome to another episode
Of the Nerdy Misfit Podcast.
That's right. So, obviously, you guys would have seen the spoiler warnings ahead. We will be talking about X-Men 97. But yeah, I guess we will just give a quick little heads up and update. We were so excited last week when we talked about whatever we talked about.
Flying Witch. Anyway.
That's what I said, Flying Witch. And that we forgot to mention that we recently went to one of our friends' weddings. He only had one wedding. He's only married to one person that we know of. So we had him on the podcast. Just want to give a shout out, congratulations to Daniel. We're going to call him Star Wars Daniel, not Dan.Chan.
The other Dan.
We're going to call him Star Wars Daniel for now. So big shout out to him. It was a good time.
Congratulations.
It was a good time. What was your favorite moment, Matt? What did you enjoy about the wedding?
I danced. That was
You
fun.
did dance.
It was a good time dancing.
Without being under the influence.
Without being
You're a
under
real
the
trooper.
influence. It was. I had a great time.
We did have a fellow friend that maybe was perhaps potentially
Tattoo
you
under
could
the influence.
maybe was possibly, and he was also dancing.
Exactly. So it was fine.
But
We were all dancing. It was great.
It was
you know?
great. It was a good time. It was beautiful. Pretty small, like a decent.
It was a healthy size wedding.
Yeah.
Not too
for sure.
small, not too big.
And it was great. Yeah, it was a pretty quick ceremony, and we jumped in. The dinner was pretty great. I'm not gonna lie.
Dinner was
Every
very
course was
delicious.
really good. No complaints. I would
mean,
say
it
it's
was
free
a
food,
joke.
but it wasn't free food because.
Yeah, it was free food for us, tech-ish. Kind of.
Well, I was gonna say,
Got
the
it.
gift, and then I paid for the rental soon.
Yeah.
So it didn't end up being free.
Well, you
but-
were part of the party, so
Yes, I was part of the wedding party. I had a speech.
your speech. I was in that speech. I was talking
You were
about
mentioned.
that speech.
You were mentioned during the ceremony.
I was mentioned various times throughout.
Yeah,
the
you were mentioned almost
by
in
the
every speech.
Officiant, by the best man speech, by one of the groom's brothers' speeches.
Yep.
I was confronted by the groom's father about it.
Yeah, it was eventful.
Yeah, it was very eventful. I became a
You were the life of the party.
I was a meme. I became a meme.
You
of
really
the
were.
wedding.
You were inside the meme
Yeah.
for that wedding. You
The
were,
inside joke of the wedding.
yeah, which was great.
Anyways, before we talk about what we're talking about, which is, if you've seen the title, is probably mentioned in the title.
Well, Matt will be
If not,
talking a lot this
I
episode.
will hopefully be talking about this episode. But before we get into it, Connor, you've made a cocktail for us.
Yes. Recently, actually, we went to a cocktail bar. Matt was there. We were out with some friends, and they were like bougier cocktails, right? More what you'd expect. Like they were mixologists. They were making their own. I'm gonna use a nerd term here. Homebrew versions of their their own custom cocktails, and I was inspired by their cocktails. So I thought I would take a crack at my first ever milk washed cocktail.
Okay.
So this one is a cocktail that I know I like. It's a whiskey sour, but it's milk washed, so it's very clear.
So for those who are watching on YouTube, you can see that Connor's holding up. I got mine as well.
Yep.
Very clear.
Very clear. I'll have Matt, since he's the one who edits, in post, I'll send him a picture of what the normal whiskey sour looks like that I have from time to time to compare. But yeah, it's very clear. Made sure to have a nice clear ice cube in there as well to help with the aesthetic of it.
Heck yeah.
But yeah, it's a very interesting process. Check out our Instagram. I'll give Matt some pictures to post of the process. But yeah, so basically I made a larger batch of a whiskey sour, which is pretty simple. It was some bourbon, lemon juice, simple syrup, and some bitters. For these ones, I think I used some cardamom bitters that I had.
Okay.
And yeah, so I just made, I think it's the equivalent of about 4 drinks. And after I'm done making the cocktail and stirring up, I poured it into like 3 ounces of milk. And then I let it curdle. And I just let it sit there for like 20, 30 minutes. And then I strained it through a coffee filter 3 times.
And here we are.
And then it comes out that clear. It took probably like 5 hours in total to strain out because it takes a while. But what do you think?
I say it was pretty good. I'm not usually a big whiskey sour guy, but it's not bad.
So yeah, the purpose of it is, it's going to sound very elitist, but it's to give it more of like, gives a different mouthfeel because it's like having that fat from, it's like having the fat from the milk, like kind of that creamy feel without it being a creamy drink. You know what I mean? Like that velvety feel of milk. And it also rounds it off. Like the whiskey is nowhere near as harsh and the sour, like the lemon, is nowhere near as aggressive. Like it's still tart, but it's not aggressively sour. I don't know if it's maybe worth the process of 5 hours, but the one cool thing is supposedly if you keep it in your fridge and you have like a properly taken care of container to put it in terms of it's properly cleaned and whatnot, you can keep it for like a really long time in the fridge. It doesn't go bad. So could be a good pre-batch idea if you're going to a party or something. Yeah. You want some bougie cocktail. But yeah, we haven't had one in a while on the podcast, so I thought.
So, first one of season 2.
First one of season 2. Next time will probably be a coffee, I'm going to be honest. It's usually our go-to.
Yeah, we're usually drinking Starbucks or something like that.
Because we usually come from work, and it's safe to say we're tired. But we make it work.
This is the earliest we've recorded in a hot.
I was going to say, I think the last time we recorded this early was months ago.
Yeah.
But, hey, that's nothing to complain about. Exactly. But shall we get into what we want to talk about?
Yeah, we're going to take a trip to
the 90s.
The 90s, but also not
so they
the
tell
90s,
us.
but kind of the 90s.
A 90s feel.
90s feel indeed. And we're going to be traveling to what is known as Earth 92131.
Okay.
Which is the universe where the X-Men and Spider-Man shows from the 90s take place. So obviously, recently a show on Disney Plus called X-Men 97 came out, which takes place in 1997. Or in theory, I should say. Takes place...
It is the X-Men.
It is, takes place 1 year after the finale of the original X-Men show, which concluded in 96.
So for the people that maybe have not seen the original X-Men, how many stories... How many are there original stories within the X-Men animated series? Are there comic book stories?
There was versions that were adapted. They did adaptations of their own version of Days of Future Past, but made it their own. They did the Phoenix Saga. They've done Apocalypse storyline, stuff like that. They did the whole Angel to Archangel. They did plenty of stories.
So they covered some massive stories.
Yeah.
Whether panel per panel or in their own way.
Yeah. But I have not watched the X-Men show in a long time.
But you own it.
But I own it on DVD, and obviously all of it's on Disney Plus. And after watching X-Men 97, the temptation to go back and watch it all is very much there.
What happens at the end of the original animated series?
At the very end, it said that Charles Xavier is dead to the public, and in reality, he goes with the Scar Empire.
Yep.
From what I can remember. And they kind of talk a little bit about it in the actual show.
Yeah, they do have a recap at the very beginning of the first episode.
Yeah.
I thought they did a pretty good job of recapping throughout the series.
Yeah, Xavier leaves with Elandra to her ship on the Shi'ar homeworld. Yeah.
All right. And Xavier's I feel like it's worth noting that we've been doing the podcast for over 100 episodes now, but we did discuss our favorite DC animated content before, and we even said in that episode that we hoped Marvel would step it up with some animated content. That one, the MCU was feeling a bit, I guess, burnout for a lot of people, or even just the quality hasn't been feeling quite up to what people expect, which could be related also to burnout. Maybe people are just feeling that way because they're tired of it.
Yeah.
But I remember we literally said, I wish there was more Marvel anime content that we said we could be like, oh, I really love this Marvel animated film or animated series because XXXXY.
And here we are.
And here we are. Because I just remember we were talking about all the Batman and the Justice League.
Yeah. There's a lot of good content.
We're more for
DC.
teen, adult, like young adults, right? Where it's not necessarily for kids. There's a lot more violence, profanity, etc. And I would say that X-Men 97 kind of is a big home run.
Agreed. I think, too, when you compare it to, like, the only other modern animated Marvel stuff would be What If, but this was its own entity, and it did a good job of having that reminiscence feel of the X-Men 90s show while still hitting it with modern.
Yeah, and it wasn't targeted towards kids, which is, I guess it wasn't totally out there. Kids could totally watch it.
Yeah.
But it does. The X-Men in general have a lot of very mature,
controversial,
a lot of mature themes, a lot of mature overarching elements to the X-Men in general.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just, I think they nailed it, and I think I speak for everyone when I say it. Maybe don't overdo it with now that they have this success, but still put time in. But maybe we can get a little more.
Well, season 2's already been confirmed. So.
But I mean, not just X-Men. Maybe we've talked about it literally last week. Potentially, we had Spider-Man, Iron Man of the 90s as well. But even just maybe an example would be, why not just do a animated movie for the original Civil War or other really popular Marvel storylines?
Similar to what DC's been doing.
Exactly, like similar to DC, where obviously we're not going to get that in the MCU. We've had the MCU version of Civil War. Wouldn't it be cool to see a proper adaptation of it just animated? So hopefully maybe that's a step. This is a step in that direction of, hey, let's start doing other storylines outside of just the nostalgia. Because that's obviously, like you said, they hit the nostalgia card hard, which I feel like was a good way to get a lot of people in initially.
Yep.
But the storytelling was really well done. The animation was really well done. And honestly, and it wasn't long. It was 10 episodes, and it just felt really...
It was solid. It was a cohesive...
Decently paced. It was... Yeah. There were... we're going to be nitpicking hard to find things to be negative about, but I think pacing is something we can say perhaps in some of those storylines suffered a bit.
Yeah.
But I'll let you take it away. We'll go quickly through each episode. Yeah. Matt will do a rundown of kind of important things that happened in the episode, any important points, and then we'll get into a broader discussion of the series as a whole.
Yeah. So obviously, like Connor said, 10 episodes. I've made mini summaries for each episode, and I have very spark noted it. So there's stuff that have happened in the episodes that I didn't talk about in these little descriptions. So if you want the full experience, watch the show.
Definitely watch the show.
Yeah, X-Men 97 episode 1 called "To Me, My X-Men." It gives you the full setup. It takes place 1 year after the end of the original show. We are introduced to a new mutant who is kind of out and about, Roberto DaCosta, who in the comics is known as Sunspot, I'm pretty sure. And then we kind of get to see all the X-Men, see how they're looking, see what they've been up to and everything like that. We see a pregnant Jean Grey, and obviously Scott's the father, and Scott and Jean are discussing wanting to leave the X-Men and kind of become parents and kind of retire from the whole shindig. And then the episode kind of ends with Magneto popping up, being like, I have the last will and testament of Xavier, and I own you guys and the school now.
I was expecting that to just be made up, like he got some mutant to forge it or something.
Something like that. But no, it was
legit.
A quite legit document. We jumped to episode 2, which is Mutant Liberation Begins. This episode fully introduces Magneto back, kind of taking over the X-Men team, and him on this whole spiel of I want to save humans and mutants. And you're like, so now you want Charles's dream.
Now he's gone, yeah.
Yeah. And then we introduced to a mini villain called the Executioner, who's a character in the comics. He is using a gun to kind of stun or get rid of mutant abilities. He shoots at Magneto. Storm kind of takes the hit instead, and Storm loses all of her powers. This episode also has Jean giving birth to Nathan. And then at the very end of this episode, it's pouring rain, and there's a knock at the front door of the mansion, and they open it up, and it's Jean Grey. Or not Jean Grey.
Wow.
Now there's 2 Jean Greys. Then we jump into episode 3, Fire Made Flesh. The Jean Grey that was at the door is actually the real Jean Grey, and the Jean Grey that we saw the last 2 episodes is in fact a clone of Jean Grey when the comics is made by Mr. Sinister, and they end up going to Mr. Sinister's lab, and the clone Jean Grey becomes a character known as Goblin Queen, which this whole happens in one episode where she goes from a clone of Jean Grey to the Goblin Queen to the end of it being like, oh, I'm fine now, and becomes Madeline Pryor. I can get it more into detail later, but that happens like over a span of years in the comic books. So, but yeah, and while it's all happening, baby Nathan is infected by a techno-organic virus that Mr. Sinister happens, and Bishop, who's been kind of here and there part of the last couple of episodes, decides to take the baby Nathan into the future to try and find a cure. Now, we jump into episode 4, Motendo, semicolon, Life, Death, Part 1, which was kind of like a weird two-parter style episode. First part is the Motendo, which is Jubilee and Roberto get put into some Mojo-verse game. Mojo's a
They
weird...
get isekai'd.
Isekai, basically, yeah. And then they get out of the game. It's whatever. Meanwhile, Storm finds Forge, who is a character who is an X-Men.
X-Men, yeah.
And she tries to get her powers back, and it fails. And then it's revealed that Forge emits to the tech for the radiation gun that was used to shoot her, and for all the collars, like the incubator collars that you've seen throughout the show, throughout the seasons past, about people that are able to like put the collar on your neck, and then it subs your mutant abilities, basically.
Yeah, it's like Sea Stone.
Yeah. For One Piece fans, it's like Sea Stone. And then Storm meets
Prism Stone, I guess.
Yeah, Sea Prism Stone. Yeah. Storm meets the adversary, which is like a weird owl demon character, which doesn't fully get explained, but
yeah, no, they didn't really. I was very confused. I couldn't tell if she was like in a dream state days or if it was actually a real character until further on when we see it again. I was like, oh,
it's a legitimate thing.
It's real.
Yeah. And that ends up causing Storm to get Forge poisoned. And then we jump back to episode 5, which in my opinion is a roller coaster of an episode.
Yeah, there's a lot happens.
Episode 5 is Remember It. Magneto, Rogue, and Gambit go to Genosha, and then Rogue and Gambit kind of break up because Rogue and Magneto have a weird relationship that they reconnect. And then they try to celebrate in Genosha, and then Cable shows up briefly and was like, yo, you guys gotta watch out. And then he gets sent back to the future before he's able to fully warn anything about to happen. And then a bunch of army of Sentinels show up and kill thousands and thousands of mutants on Genosha, including Magneto and Gambit, as Gambit sacrifices himself to save Rogue. Heroic death.
It's also revealed that when Cable is there, that what's-her-face is his mom. It's
Madeline Pryor.
Because she recognizes him, and he already knew.
Yeah. Then we jump back to episode 6, which is Life, Death, Part 2. Finally, episode about Xavier. You see he's with the CR Empire, and he's planning to get married to Lilandra, who was the one that took him away at the end of the first series. There's a huge discussion about him being human and being connected to Earth, that he shouldn't be married into the Empire. And then he ends up putting a bunch of the Shi'ar Empire into the astral plane for some education. And it's a weird, cringy, but kind of funny thing where he's like, classes in session. And he kind of gives him a full education. And then Xavier goes back to Earth because he has a vision in the astral plane of Gambit dying.
I think it was a vision of not just Gambit, but mutants in general.
Yeah,
the amount of
hurting.
death that was going on, yeah.
So he decides to leave back for Earth. Meanwhile, Forges uses his mother's spell book, which has a very similar design when he uses the spells to like a Doctor Strange kind of thing. I haven't looked into this too much on the comics, if Forge is connected to some magical thing or if that was kind of like a Doctor Strange Easter egg. But then Storm regains her power somehow and defeats the adversary, and then Storm finds a way to heal Forge. Now we jump into episode 7, Bright Eyes, which kind of like at the beginning just felt like a weird like Easter egg episode almost, because Rogue is bouncing from place to place. And she visits General Ross, who in the comics is Red Hulk, Thunderbolt Ross. He was in the Incredible Hulk movie. And then eventually she sees Captain America and ends up like just yeeting his shield like it's nothing.
Yep.
Then she finds Gyrick in Mexico, and then she leaves, and then Gyrick gets killed somehow. Then the X-Men travel to Metapor, which is a big place in the comics. That's also where the Falcon and Winter Soldier show took place. They learn that there's a secret Sentinel program. There's a scene where Rogue ends up finding Trask and just drops him to his death out of a window, and then he becomes a human Sentinel hybrid. And then Cable shows up, defeats Trask, and then the big bad is revealed is Bastion. And he has Magneto kidnapped, because, spoiler alert, Magneto, still alive.
Yep, because in episode 5 we thought he was dead.
Exactly. Then we get to the last 3 episodes, which is Tolerance is Extinction Part 1, 2, and 3. Episode 8, Part 1, the world finds out that Xavier is alive, and then Cyclops, Jean, and Cable learn that Bastion is a human-machine hybrid. And then that Prime Sentinels activate around the world. Magneto goes crazy and creates a worldwide blackout. And Xavier returns. And this episode gave me goosebumps at the end because it's just Xavier being like, to me, my X-Men.
Yeah, very classic.
Yeah, very nostalgic.
And Magneto popping off. I think what he actually did was he was ruining the magnetic pull of the actual
goes to
Earth.
The north, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, and he actually affects the magnetic pull of the entire Earth, which causes blackouts everywhere and other issues as well. And yeah,
like a level mutant, dude.
It's pretty crazy. A lot of Easter eggs in that episode too, just different people reacting to what's going on.
We see a lot of throughout the next 3 episodes, like part 1, 2, and 3. We see Spider-Man pop up, Daredevil pop up, the Avengers pop up,
Cloak and Dagger
pop up. A lot of good like characters that we've known existed during this time period. Episode 9, Tolerance Extinction Part 2. Rogue and Roberto, aka Sunspot, finally just joined Magneto, and it's revealed that Magneto has what's called Asteroid M, which is just where he's chilling now on an asteroid. And the X-Men
took one from the Justice League.
More or less. The X-Men split up into 2 teams. One team goes to Asteroid M, while other teams battle Sentinels and Mr. Sinister. And then the end of this episode is Wolverine's adamantium basically getting ripped out of his body by Magneto after Wolverine tries to kill Magneto. This has happened in the comics before, and this is also referenced, I think, in X-Men Days of Future Past, the live-action film, where he is basically ripped and thrown into water, and then that whole thing.
Like it was pretty pulled from the panel. I think I saw some shorts where they showed the panel.
Yeah.
Very similar body positioning by Wolverine when it happens.
Then we get to the season finale of Tolerance is Extinction Part 3. Xavier takes control of Magneto and restores power to the Earth. Jean becomes the Phoenix again briefly. We're just going to breeze over that.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that.
It's weird because like in the comics, sometimes she can just kind of call upon it a little bit because she's like one with it, but then it usually
is
takes
it because
over.
like she's had the power, so it's like kind of just part of her forever?
Kind of. It's up to interpretation. The government ends up launching missiles at Asteroid M to destroy it, and then Magneto and Xavier send the asteroid more into space, and then it explodes, and most of the X-Men are just presumed dead on this asteroid. And then we jump 6 months into the future, and Forger's there trying to figure out all the X-Men and stuff, and Bishop pops up and was like, yo, the X-Men are just trapped through a time, man. We just gotta go.
Classic X-Men. They're not dead. They're just scattered amongst
through time, dude. Gosh.
Yeah, during this episode 9 and 10, I was actually expecting the mind melding of Professor X and Magneto.
Onslaught was definitely foreshadowed there.
I was expecting it because they were like, oh, like I could be trapped in Eric's mind and we could become one. I was like, oh, yeah. Does that mean we are getting him at the end of this?
We got Onslaught.
That's how initially I thought it was going to end, with Onslaught being
Onslaught is
or born or
terrifying creature.
So,
if for those who don't know, Onslaught is basically the consciousness of Magneto and Charles Xavier in one. And the costume is like the design of the character is just goosebumps.
Yeah, the design is great of the character. But we didn't see him.
Yet. And then to final off, for those who don't know, there is a post-credit scene. Surprise. And it takes place modern day on Genosha after everything's been destroyed. Apocalypse is just walking around and comes across a little playing card for Remy LeBeau, a.k.a. Gambit, which is heckin' implying that Gambit will just be one of the 4 horsemen.
Yeah,
probably
one of his horsemen for the next season.
Yeah.
Also shows that, well, one, that Apocalypse is present in the present day, even though they're also with past Apocalypse in some of the X-Men that we see.
Egypt, yeah.
Before he became
when
Apocalypse.
He was known as Unsubbanur.
And so obviously Apocalypse is going to be a major player in the next season for sure.
Different versions of him.
I'm sure everyone will be questioning who all of his horsemen will be this time.
Yeah. Which I'm pumped for. I mean, Apocalypse is
because if you're a stranger to comics, I'm going to tell you something. No one is ever dead.
No one is ever dead except for 2 characters in Marvel. Every character, no other character. Well, just one character actually. There's only one character in basically all of Marvel that stays dead, and that's Uncle Ben.
That's Ace. Oh, I mean, Uncle Ben.
So that's the brief rundown of the episodes. There's also a documentary they put up on Disney Plus called From Their Assembled series, which is the making of X-Men 97. So I watched that, kind of made a couple notes and stuff. It was interesting because they brought back half the cast from the original show to voice some of the characters and stuff. Obviously, some of the characters couldn't come back. The actors couldn't come back because they passed away. But a really cool thing that I've learned while watching this is the fact that when they made the show in the 90s, they didn't do a traditional Hollywood thing where they didn't pick big actors. They didn't go to Hollywood for voice actors. Instead, they turned to the theater. And that's why it's like some of the...
They do say voice actors need to be overacting.
Exactly. So why not go to the heart of it all?
Yeah, like some of the accents are a bit much.
It is, but I mean, that's how it was in the 90s. So, like Rogue sounded like that, right?
Yeah. And I mean, you got to at least respect the fact that, hey, these characters are from this area.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
let's give them the accent for that area. So I at least am like, okay, that's at least kind of cool to see, because it doesn't happen as often as it probably should in voice acting for obviously we watch a lot of Japanese content, which is in Japanese. A lot harder for us to notice dialect change or accent in terms of Japanese. But in English, you would expect it to happen more often than you'd think, but it doesn't happen that often.
Yeah, it's mostly everyone just mimicking American accents.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of actors and actresses that are not from America.
Exactly.
That are big in Hollywood, and you just assume that they had they're just American voices.
So it is nice to see people, and obviously like directors, and be like, hey, this character's from this area of the United States. Yeah. Let's try and pay homage to that.
Exactly.
Origin.
With the X-Men 97, when they were creating it, they brought back various people that worked on the show in the 90s, some of the directors, the producers, and was like, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And obviously, they brought back some of the voice actors.
Which is very nice to see.
Agreed. I think when it's like a passion project / sequel to a show, you'd want the people that made it originally to approve of it, right?
For sure.
A lot of they were inspired by the way the original X-Men show was done, so they kind of copied the 2D background style, where the background doesn't really move too much.
Yep.
They did this probably for about 80% of the show, where the other 20% they move the background around more to help create emotion, really build the characters up, right? Another thing too is when they first shot it and like edited or whatever, right? They end up throwing like a 90s filter over it to kind of give that just slight crisp older TV show feel.
Yeah.
Which I'm very glad they did, because it almost felt like
it was the next season of the animated series.
Yeah. Exactly.
Just 20 years later.
27 years later.
Another thing that was something I guess we'll be seeing used a lot more often, especially in something like the X-Men, is that they basically kept the term canon event ongoing.
Yes, the fixed moment in time.
So,
yeah,
which if you've seen the Spider-Man,
the second Spider-Verse movie,
it that was both memed, but also a big impactful part of that movie was that there are certain moments in time that have to happen.
Yeah.
And basically, obviously, Cable being a massive time traveler, there were moments that he just could not stop.
And that's discussed briefly later on throughout the season of him, like everything that happened at Genosha, that explosion, people dying, like that had to happen.
Yes.
But yeah, do you want to, what are your thoughts on the show overall? Like I can chat for a while here, but I can go on a little bit more for behind the scenes, the animation studios.
I thought the show was good. I mean, there's not much else to say. I mean, it's so highly ranked on stuff like IMDb and whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, it was the
highest
Disney
for
announced that the first episode had 4 million views worldwide in the 5 days following its release, marking it the second biggest first season premiere for a full-length animated series on Disney Plus since the first season of What If.
So that's pretty impressive. I think it's safe to say a lot of people were very excited.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I think there was just a lot. They did a lot of good things where obviously there goes the coaster. Some things were very from the comics, like the Wolverine losing his adamantium and stuff. But it was also nice to see some, I'm assuming there was still original content weaved within there. And I just felt like it was done in a way where you couldn't really tell what was comic, or maybe you could if you've read the stories.
I don't know if you know this, but Morph is not from the comics.
I was going to ask when I was watching it, I was like, I do not recognize this character at all.
Morph was made in the show in the 90s originally.
Okay.
And I don't know how much you remember the show, but Morph was killed off in the first or second episode.
Okay.
And then he came back later on here and there. But yeah, he is not an original character from the
I was
comics.
going to say, because if he was, he's one of the most broken characters then.
Oh, the shapeshifter, yeah.
Because based on what they showed, it's not just shape-shifting. He is becoming that thing, whatever he becomes, and has their abilities.
Yeah.
Because at first, he almost looks identical to Chameleon.
Yep, I can see that, yeah.
Like his actual look from the 90s Spider-Man, they look the same, only
Very
Chameleon
similar.
uses a belt. He's not a mutant. For a second, I was like, are they cousins? Like, what's going on here? But he actually gets the powers of the thing of person he turns into, which seems broken. Obviously, we see him turn into the Hulk,
Mr. Fantastic,
Fantastic,
Quicksilver at one point,
and
Sauron,
and he's running like Quicksilver, and he's like doing a bunch of mini jabs really quickly.
Broken character.
So that was interesting, very interesting character. Obviously, we got a lot of Easter eggs towards other characters, like we mentioned. We saw Peter Parker. We saw Peter Parker with MJ.
Which, for those who don't remember, at the end of the Spider-Man animated show,
he's searching for MJ.
He's searching for Mary Jane. So
because another clone, shocker. Some of these things were just used a lot.
It's the 90s, man.
He was with MJ and married MJ, but he didn't marry MJ because it was actually all a clone. She was a Hydro clone all along.
Bow, bow, bow.
Wow, wow, wow. So obviously he found MJ.
Yep.
Potentially, or that could be him with the Hydro. But here's hoping it's actually MJ.
Do you have a favorite episode? Least favorite episode?
I wouldn't say there. I think that my least favorite episodes were probably the video game one.
Yeah, episode 4.
Didn't care for that as much. I did
meant to
like
just kind of build the friendship between Jubilee and Sunspot.
Well, and I did like the Jubilee and Sunspot's like rapport and constant going through because they're both young. Obviously, Jubilee through the show is 17 and turns 18 in the show.
Yeah.
Very young. Sunspot also very young. So I did like that they're both younger and they're building this rapport, kind of have the connection. Obviously, they're both mutants. They both felt like they don't belong, etc.
Yep.
So I did like that, but I wasn't a big fan of that episode specifically. Favorite episode, though? That's tough. I think my favorite episode is probably episode 5, just for everything that happens.
Genosha, Cable, Gambit. Magneto.
Well, and it's not just that. Like, you have... Even the first half is dramatic, because you have Magneto's obviously kind of trolling Gambit.
Yeah.
Because him and Rogue have a thing, I guess. That was a little weird. But I like that. Gambit's like, I'm tagging along. Like the jealous guy.
Shari.
And then obviously you have the drama of Genosha being like, hey, Magneto, we want you to be essentially the king. And then they're like, and he's like, I'll only do it if Rogue is my right hand.
Basically.
Yeah. And she says yes to it because she wants to make a difference for mutants. Mm-hmm. So even all of that is already like, there's a lot going on.
Good info, yeah.
A lot going on. And then obviously it just gets more and more dramatic as Cable comes, and then we see like the crazy I'm gonna call it a mutant sentinel. The irony. Because get it, sentinels are supposed to kill mutants. Mm-hmm. And then it was just tragic after that.
Gambit's death is insane.
Yeah, it was that was someone who loves someone sacrificing themselves.
Yeah.
But even just how disturbing the scenes are, like, it felt very real. Obviously there's war and stuff going on right now in the world, and it's just not something you want to see. And I think they did a really good job of portraying like no one wins. Like, it's just
no one wins in war.
It's a bad So it was just a really well done episode from start to finish. Obviously, like the climax episodes were good, but they're good together,
Yeah.
not just a single episode. Personally, that's what I think, at least. Yeah, I liked, obviously, the opening was not the exact opening, but obviously same notes, like inspired by.
We'll talk about the intro soon.
And so that was nice. I do think they overused it a bit in some of the episodes, because I remember you messaged me like, are you listening to the or watching the opening every time? I was like, no, because it plays like every other episode in the show. Mm-hmm. Like, you don't even need to watch the opening to hear it.
There was a time they played the opening. I think it's in the last episode. I think it was just more of like a piano version or like a slowed down version.
Yeah.
And that gave me a little bit of goosebumps because it was like in like the climax of the episode, and it was just subtly playing in the background. I was like, dang, something bad's going to happen.
It is a very nice tune, though.
Oh, yeah. Great.
And obviously they had a lot of the similar animation, like the characters at what moment during the opening. So that was cool to see, obviously in homage to the original. But so that'd be my favorite episode. Some things, if we're being very, very critical, I shouldn't preface it by being very critical.
Very, very critical.
Some of the things I didn't like in the series was how fast Storm gets her powers back.
Yep.
It didn't feel as impactful as perhaps it could have been.
Yeah.
Because Storm is a very crazy broken character in the world of Marvel.
She is Omega level mutant, but she might be.
She has to be, with the amount of stuff she can control. But she's a very powerful mutant nonetheless, and her being away from the X-Men is a very impactful because they're missing a powerhouse.
Yeah.
And it just felt very quick with her getting her powers. I would have liked it more if they told her story every other episode and a little bit more, and work towards maybe even like the finale she comes back.
See, in a way, like, it was rushed, I agree, but I'm almost happy that they gave her powers back before the season finale, because that would be like the most cliche thing.
Of course.
Her showing up, saving the day.
It would have been even crazier if maybe the first episode of next season is when she gets her powers back or something. Yeah. But I did think that she got her powers back a little quickly. Mm-hmm. There were... I can't remember if there was anything else. I can't remember off the top of my head, but there was another weird pacing. Felt too quick. I can't remember what episode it was, though. But there were just a few scenarios in which things felt like they were moving just a bit too fast.
Yeah.
And obviously, this is what I mean by it's like super nitpicky. Because first, the Storm, for example, like Matt said, obviously they wanted to have her ready for the final, but also have her be able to see her friends and be like, hey, I've got my powers back. Yeah. I'm here for you guys. Like, let's do this kind of thing.
Oh, yeah. When she reconnects with Jean Grey, like,
that was really nice.
Really good moment.
One thing when I was first watching that I was not a fan of was we have Jean with Storm when she's discussing leaving, and she's like, I became I had a Phoenix entity take over. And she's like almost telling the audience, like, at first I thought it was, oh, she's letting people that maybe haven't seen the original X-Men series know, I've had the Phoenix Saga has already occurred, if they know what that is, and she kind of gives a little brief of what the entity, but she's describing it out loud to Storm, but Storm was there.
Yeah.
But no one ever says anything that Storm was there, and I was like, this is really weird. But it's later. Thankfully, I didn't text Matt and was like, this is stupid. I watched the show, and then later on, it's revealed because it happens again, but this time with the actual Jean Grey.
Yeah.
Where it's revealed because she says it to someone, and then she's like, oh, you were there. And it's because both of their memories are... they don't know whose each other's memories are, exactly. And it's all just
you also got to keep in mind that
puzzle.
Her telling Storm could just be her, like, trying to, like, tell herself that she did that. Like, the clone did it and everything, right? Like,
yeah, like her trying to believe that it was her.
Exactly.
So... at first, I was like, this is kind of cringe, but then it makes more sense as it's revealed who she is and the further on in the story. So,
agreed.
Not as mad about it. It was actually more of a nice little foreshadowing thing for it. I guess a question for you would be, one, what are you looking forward to in season 2? That would be my first question. And my second question would be, are there any arcs that you want, like stories that you want Disney to tell for your X-Men? And would it work for this specific X-Men 97 in terms of like, this very classic feel? Because obviously we've got some pretty amazing stories from X-Men in recent decades. But would it work in this team? Is I
see what you mean. Yeah. I'm excited for season 2. It obviously looks like they're kind of doing like a Age of Apocalypse inspired story where they're gonna have modern apocalypse, but then you also have your teams that are in the future with a younger version of Cable, and then you have your other X-Men in Egypt time, like the time of the pharaohs, basically. So I'm really curious because that's going to be 3 storylines going on at once.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot more for them to handle. Kind of feels One Piece-esque in terms of like the team is very... And I know that's a big complaint people have about One Piece is, the team's
so
never
spread
it's never
across,
together. We're all following all these different things.
Exactly.
So they'll have to handle it very well.
I think they'll do okay. I am also curious if they're going to bring new X-Men characters in, because if you have most of your team either in the past and in the future, and Apocalypse is in present day, who's going to fight Apocalypse?
Well, there were some people we haven't seen, obviously.
Yeah, but I'm assuming that's where we'll see certain characters. But so I'm curious about that. In reference to do any storyline like live action, I mean, one of my favorite storylines from recent years is Battle of the Atom. I don't think they'd be able to do that because that's kind of like because of what happened during Avengers versus X-Men.
They would have to do Avengers versus
They would have
X-Men.
to do Avengers versus
Would
X-Men.
that work?
I don't think they would. Just because...
Because the Avengers is something they already have.
Yeah.
X-Men is something we haven't seen in the MCU
yeah. So
yet.
keeping it separate is definitely probably better for the time
Probably
being.
easier for people to follow,
Yeah.
I guess. But I would personally love to see Avengers versus X-Men
I think
brought
it'd
to
be
life.
epic to see.
And I think it should be done animated.
Oh, yeah.
Personally. Like, I don't need to see it. It would be cool to see how the MCU would tell that story. Obviously, it would be Civil War.
Yeah.
Where it wouldn't be... There were so many things from Civil War that just couldn't be told in the MCU's version because they had to make it work. Right? They had to make it work for the MCU's story.
There has done a more recent storyline called like Judgment Day, which is like revealed that people that are mutants are technically like a form of deviance, which connects to Inhumans, which then also connects to the Eternals, because the Eternals were created to hunt down deviants and all that stuff. So they could bring the X-Men more into that to create the Avengers versus X-Men doing the MCU way.
But if you want to see it told purely,
I would. Avengers versus X-Men.
It would have to be animated.
Would be so good.
And so much drama.
Oh, yeah. With the Phoenix Force being created, and then you have like Avengers versus X-Men led to the divorce between Storm and Black Panther.
And also, it doesn't end very nicely.
It's not end very nice. And it also shows like people who are X-Men who have been on the team of Avengers before being like, where do I go? Like Beast and Wolverine specifically, they've been on Avengers teams in the past. And like, you gotta keep in mind, like Wolverine and Captain America are old friends from the war and stuff like that. And you have like other characters that have known each other for years upon years, and they're just stuck in the middle.
I would say it is almost a better Civil War, in my opinion.
In a way,
the way the
yes.
story, because of how much more impactful it is. Because Civil War, it's two ideologies of like, I think that heroes should be monitored and you should have to register, and then you have someone who's like, no, this is America.
Yeah.
I wonder if you guys can tell who that guy is. His name might be Captain
Of the Americas.
of America. But the drama between that is very intense because certain people cross lines that people didn't expect, and then the line of, are you even a hero anymore with some of the stuff that's going on is blurred a lot during that. But X-Men versus the Avengers is just...
It mostly is the Phoenix entity coming back to Earth, and the Avengers being like, well, we got to take it down. And X-Men's like, well, no, this is our thing. Which, honestly, I enjoy the storyline a lot more because it breaks the cliche of if it's an Avengers thing,
Only Avengers.
only Avengers are going to do
Which
it.
was part
If
of
it's
this.
X-Men.
It was part of the end of this. There was an issue, right? I mentioned to you when I
Exactly, yeah.
finished where the Earth or the U.S. takes out or shoots missiles at the asteroid, and then it's not enough. Well, they shoot missiles at the asteroid, then causing the asteroid to plummet towards Earth and potentially wipe out all of Eastern North America, which would have wiped us out. Just a heads up.
It's fine.
But yeah, so that was on them to start with. That was kind of dumb.
Yep.
And then no one's doing anything, and we just see like the Avengers are just chilling. Iron Man, Cap, they're just chilling in like
They're
a
doing their
bunker.
own little thing.
And you're just like, hello? Earth's mightiest heroes?
Not
Is
so much
apocalyptic
anymore.
level event about to occur?
Yeah.
But this is an X-Men story, so we can't have the world's mightiest heroes show up to save Earth.
Exactly.
They only do that during Avengers. Know your storyline.
Gosh. But that's what I enjoy about Avengers vs. X-Men is that it's a global, like a...
There's political ties to it where it's like,
Exactly.
hey, this is our job. And it's like, no, we deal with it. And it's like, no.
It breaks that stereotype, which is great. So that'd be really fun to see animated. But all that aside, wrapping it back to X-Men 97, season 2 will be fun. I'm hoping that it kind of stays with 10 episodes. Like, I think it's really good. For me, the animation was great. I loved it. It was like an updated version.
There were a couple scenes that are a little bit more jarring to watch, but for the most part, it was very clean.
Yeah.
It had that aesthetic.
It was
Like
done
you
by
said, the
Tiger
filter.
Animation and Studio Mir. They've done stuff with Legend of Korra. They've done some Voltron stuff. They did some animation services for Young Justice. They did some
Hell
of the
yeah, I
Harley
love
Quinn
Young
show.
Justice.
They've done a bunch. That's Studio Mir. Tiger Animation. They've done Avatar: The Last Airbender. Some of the Batman: Brave and the Bold. Spectacular Spider-Man. A lot of the DC animated films. Crest on to Earth. Return of the Black.
So they do a lot of Western animation.
Yeah, exactly. So
Tons of
which
So
does-
hired the
great.
right people.
Exactly.
I guess let's ask, we can do this for both of us, but who is your favorite X-Men? But it has to be within the X-Men 97. You can't just say Iceman or something.
I see what you mean. I mean, Cable is still a great character,
Yeah,
so I can't. Cable.
still Cable.
Still Cable.
I do love Nightcrawler, and I was super pumped when we saw Nightcrawler.
Especially with his pirate swords.
Yeah,
It was great.
3-sword style.
Yeah, 3 swords. The original 3-sword style.
3-sword style. So yeah, I do really love seeing Nightcrawler. I just think teleportation is just an amazing ability in general.
And he's such a great character design.
He's fun, cool design. Love the German accent. Love that he's a priest. Like he's just a very complicated character. There's so much going on. I also do like Wolverine. It is always nice to see Wolverine told as Wolverine and not. I love Hugh Jackman and I love Hugh Jackman's Wolverine, but he's not as Wolverine-y as Wolverine actually is in comics or in the X-Men animated series. And it is just nice it's just refreshing to see someone else's take on the character, obviously, but just he just doesn't care, and he's just like, oh, he's great.
I love the character designs too of seeing different costumes
Yes.
of the characters. I thought was really fun.
What'd you think of the Easter egg where Cyclops is gives Cable his
What do you
yellow,
want to see? Wear black leather?
wear black leather, which is obviously a Easter egg to the movie where Cyclops gives Wolverine a black leather suit, and he's like, what do you expect? Like yellow and blue spandex or something?
Blue and yellow tights or something like spandex. Something. Yeah.
Which is
great.
obviously what the X-Men wear, and there was a joke too that those colors wouldn't work in a real Hollywood movie.
Yeah.
But that's what everyone wants.
Exactly.
It would look awful though. Looking at Wolverine and Daredevil, it looks okay on Wolverine, but imagine a whole team. It would look a bit. Yeah. It would be a bit colorful.
My last big takeaway before we wrap up this episode is you obviously skipped the intros, but there is a YouTube video that plays all the intros at the same time, and I'll show it to you after. But they updated the intro every single episode for importance of characters. So Magneto, who wasn't really in the first episode, he's not in the intro. But Magneto is in the intro in episode 2 to 5 when he's a relevant character. After Storm loses her powers in episode 2, she's out of the intros until later on when she gets her powers back. And her costume design is different in the intro as well. So she was.
Why was her powers able to summon a new suit, by the way?
The 90s, man. It's the 90s.
Okay, because that and her hair grew
Yeah.
because she had like shaved head.
Yeah,
like,
she had
on
the
the
shaved
side.
sides and stuff like
And then her powers came back, and then she both summoned a suit, but then also had a full head of hair. Is that maybe to tell us time difference, or
maybe? I don't know. Couldn't tell you.
yeah,
We really don't. There is no time. Like, we don't know how long.
that took over? Like
Exactly,
took over.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that was really cool seeing her Storm getting taken out of the intro and then brought back in with a different costume design. Gambit doesn't exist in the intros after episode 5. Rest in peace.
Sad. What a fun character though.
Nightcrawler gets added on episode
he
6
does.
and move. When Professor X comes back into the story, he gets added back in. Bishop gets taken out after episode 3. Forge and Cable, they're actually foreshadowed throughout the openings just by small clips and everything like that, and then they become more prevalent on later on. But I think that's just fun. I think it's cool that they like use the intro to help tell a story of like either be foreshadowing or being like, yeah, this character is now more important.
Or if you were watching it weekly and
Yeah.
you watched both the recap and the opening, and be like, oh yeah, that is what happened. Then you proceed to watch something. Oh,
he's gone.
he's not there.
Why is Gambit not in the intro?
Magneto's not
anymore?
in the opening.
Yeah. So I think it was fun in that way.
I agree for sure.
Yeah. Long story short, I'm super pumped for season 2. Unsure when we're going to get it. Probably a couple years away.
Definitely a couple years
But-
away. Fingers crossed that Marvel steps up their animation game now, seeing how much people care about it and love it.
People want Spider-Man
If they put
98.
out good content, that's the thing. The stories have to be good, but if they do it, then people will watch it.
This is also pivotal time in X-Men.
Cartoons just don't have to be for kids.
It's true. With X-Men 97 coming back, that's going to build the X-Men hype. We got Deadpool 3 coming out, which is going to build the X-Men hype. And in Marvel Comics fashion, which they did, this is the end of what's called the Krakoa age in the comics for X-Men. And in a month or so, I think June or July, all the X-Men, there's brand new teams. They're back in New York. Some of them are in Alaska.
Yeah, and some of them are in the future, and some of them are in the past.
Oh, they're
but
doing their own things.
But the past one and the future ones, they're all in the present because
they're all
it's the X-Men.
interconnected. Exactly. But yeah, so I think it's a pivotal moment. Like if you're an X-Men fan, you could jump in X-Men 97. You could jump in the comics next month.
Or you can read. There's the app, the Marvel app,
Yep,
and you
Marvel
can read
Unlimited.
back tons of
and
stories.
thousands of X-Men
Some of them are very
comics.
complicated, though.
Yeah.
Just a heads up.
So if you have any questions about X-Men storylines, ask away in the Discord, and
Yeah, Matt will answer you.
see what I can do.
It won't be me. I can promise you.
But in conclusion, that's our wrap up, etc. on X-Men 97.
I would say 9 out of 10.
9 out of 10. Great show.
Loved
Overall,
it. Hit the feels, but also
Voice
felt
acting was
relevant
great.
as
Felt
well.
relevant. Felt like it was out of the 90s, like a good sequel season.
And hopefully we'll see more from Marvel.
Exactly.
Next week will be our
Summer anime.
summer anime preview. I can't believe we're already there because I think this week would be episode 8 for a lot of the
8 or
12
9,
episode
yeah.
show. So, wow, season flew by.
Agreed. I need to catch up a little bit.
So we'll probably have a little bit of what we've watched this season and maybe what we recommend from the season that just happened. And then we'll dive right into what we'll potentially be watching.
Exactly.
So,
So until then, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching if you're watching on YouTube.
yes, thank you for
Join
watching.
the Discord to be able to ask questions, answer questions. Join the Anime of the Month chat.
Yeah, we got a lot going on in the
Exactly.
Discord.
We had a
so-
new channel, so if you're a nerd and you do hauls to GameStop or Indigo, Barnes and
Manga,
Noble,
whatever it be.
manga, anime, whatever you're doing, send
Show us
a
what you're
picture of the
collecting. Show
haul.
us what you're working on. Show us what you
Exactly.
got.
And
Got to
until
show it
then-
off, right? Like, what's the point of having
Exactly.
it?
What's the point? Yeah.
But yeah, and also don't forget to subscribe on YouTube. Helps us out, and drop a like. Ring the bell for the notification so you see when the podcast goes live. But if you don't know, we also post the podcast every Wednesday. For if you don't
Every
want to
Wednesday.
ring the bell, it's every Wednesday
We've been doing this
on all
for over 100 weeks
on
in a
all
row.
podcast platforms and on YouTube. So
Heck yeah. So until then,
until then, we'll see ya.
thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
TNMP, the Nerdy Misfit Podcast. Don't forget to join the island by dropping a follow. Thank you, and see you next week.